All right, hello boys and girls, and in this video I will be covering the moon. The moon is a quarter of the Earth's size. So let's write that down. It is a quarter of the size of Earth. It is 380,000 kilometers away from Earth. The moon has no atmosphere. And because it has no atmosphere, there is no temperature. The temperature fluctuates immediately. It doesn't stay hot, it doesn't stay cold. In the light, it's over 100 degrees Celsius, and in the shadows, it's below 0 degrees Celsius. So anywhere on the moon, it can go from very hot to very cold instantly. Right, the moon is covered in craters. And the craters were caused by or created when the moon was hit by asteroids moving through space. So it's covered in craters caused by asteroids hitting it. All right, that's just some basic information about the moon. If you need more, my notes cover that section quite well. All right, let's move on. All right, the moon, similar to the Earth, revolves and rotates as it moves through space. So as the moon rotates, it also revolves around the Earth. And the reason why you only see one side of the moon, let me just show you its rotation path. It's a revolution path. It revolves in an anti-clockwise motion around planet Earth, as I show you here. And as it revolves, it also rotates, but its rotation speed is equal to its revolution speed, which is why you only see the same side of the moon continuously. So you never see the other side of the moon, which is why they call it the dark side of the moon. Right, so let me just write that down. The moon rotates and it also revolves around the Earth. One lunar revolution, which is how long it takes the moon to complete one revolution around the Earth. One revolution equals roughly 28 days. And to be precise, it's 27 days, 7 hours, and 43 minutes. But I won't penalize you if you don't give me exact time. 28 days or 27 days is just fine. All right, let's move on to the moon phases. Now, as we mentioned before, the moon revolves around the Earth, right? And depending on... Hold on, learners. All right, depending on the moon's position in relation to the sun and the Earth, depending on that, we see different phases different phases of the moon from our position on Earth. All right, so let's take a look at that. All right, so the sun in this diagram is on the right side, okay? And if you can see here, we always start at new moon, right? So from A to H, which shows all the lunar phases, all right? And if you see in the inner ring from A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, you'll see that if you were an astronaut in space looking at the moon at this angle, the light will always be the same. However, because you're on Earth, right, because everyone on Earth will see the moon phase or the shadow and the light falling on the moon differently because based on their perspective of the moon, the sun, and the Earth. All right, so at A, you can see that the shadowed side of the moon is facing us, right, directly. So this is when the moon is between the Earth and the sun. So we see the complete shadow, and so we see what we see on this side is the new moon. So basically the moon is covered completely in shadow on the side that faces us. Then as it moves, right, remember it moves counterclockwise. Let me just draw my skew arrow there. Okay. As it moves counterclockwise, the next phase is a waxing crescent, and that's when the light begins to grow on the moon from the side of the sun. So the light will always begin to appear on the moon on the side where the sun is, right? And the first step would be, well, the first phase after new moon is waxing crescent. The next phase at C is first quarter, and that's when the moon is half covered in light, half covered in shadow. At D, we see a waxing gibbous, right? Waxing gibbous means that the light from the sun is almost completely covering the moon with just a little bit of shadow left on the moon. And then the last step where the moon, or the last phase of the waxing, or the last waxing phase where the light's growing, is the full moon. And that's when the light is completely covering the side of the moon that we can see. And that is when the moon is in the opposite side of the Earth and the sun. So the moon will be covered in complete sunlight, and that's why we can see a full moon. Right, before I continue, it's probably important to note, or to help you learn, just remember crescent. If you can see the shape of crescent here, the shape of crescent reminds me of a croissant, which is a French pastry with the shape. So croissant, crescent, right? They sound similar, and it's an easy way for you to remember that word. Okay, first quarter, because if you divide this into 4 quarters, that would be the first quarter that we come across, and that's why it's called first quarter. Then waxing gibbous. Remember, a gibbous is an old English word for a deformed face. So since the moon is not full yet, its face looks deformed, so that's why they call it a gibbous. And waxing means that the light is growing. So you can remember wax on, wane off. So you wax the light onto the moon, and then once we get to the waning stages, you're waning the light back off. All right, so let's continue from full. The next phase after full moon is waning. So now after the light has covered the moon, the next step would be for the light to go back off and the shadow to come back on. And the shadow will start coming back onto the moon on the same side as the sun. So in waxing, the light comes on the side of the sun, and in waning, the shadow comes onto the moon from the side of the sun. All right, so the first one is waning gibbous. So again, gibbous because most of the light's covered in shadow, except waning now because the shadow the light's going off and the shadow is coming back on. After waning, you get third quarter, remember? The third quarter because it would be 3 quarters after the beginning so after new moon, 3 quarters, and that's why we call it third quarter. And then the final one before new moon again is waning crescent, and we call it waning crescent because the light is almost completely gone, and again we have a shape of a crescent. So almost remember, croissant, crescent. All right, and then after that, after the 28 days is complete, we go back to the start, which is new moon once again. All right. Now, I'd like to tell you a little story. And the reason why I'm going to tell you a story is because people like stories, and we tend to learn better when we hear a story, right? And this story is just to help you understand the phases of the moon better, so you have a better, or you can remember the way the light comes onto the moon during waxing, and when the shadow comes to the moon during waning. All right, let's start. So I want you to imagine, right, this, as I tell the story, I want you to imagine this. So once upon a time, the sun was very upset that the Earth children were not able to see during the night because the sun would go away. So he wanted the Earth children to see. So he created a moon sweeper, right? He gave the moon sweeper a magical broom that had the power, had the same solar magic that the sun had to brush away the shadow on the moon. The sun said, "Keep the moon shining bright so that the Earth children can see in the night." The moon sweeper was thrilled at his job and began sweeping immediately. The moon sweeper started on the side with the sun behind him, and began sweeping away the shadows vigorously. Shoo, shoo, shoo. As the moon sweeper swept away the shadow, after 3.5 days, the Earth children could see this shape on the moon. Do you recognize this shape? Right. So the moon sweeper had an idea. He thought that if he swept all the shadows off to one edge, he could push the shadows off the edge of the moon, because he thought that the moon was flat. But, as we know, the moon is not flat. In fact, the moon is round. So little did he know that as he was sweeping the shadows to one side, they were not being pushed off the edge of the moon. Instead, they were just going around the moon. After another 3.5 days, he was half done with his job, with sweeping away the shadows on one side of the moon. And do you recognize the shape? After another 3.5 days, the moon was almost completely, the moon sweeper was almost completely done with his job, and most of the moon was covered in the light of his magic broom. And only a little shadow remained. After 14 days, the moon sweeper was done, or so he thought. He looked down and saw something that disturbed him. It was still shadow on the moon. But how, he wondered. To his dismay, he was not done with his job. He did not sweep all the shadow off the moon, and there was still so much shadow, as far as his eyes could see, remaining. He was puzzled. No, this cannot be. I shall sweep the shadows until I see no more shadow on this moon. I will give the sun, I will reach the request of the sun. Right, and as we can see here, the moon sweeper began sweeping the shadows. But what he didn't see, and what we can see, is that as he sweeps the shadows from one side, they just move on to the next. As he swept, the Earth children started seeing different phases of the moon. From this one, where the shadows started creeping back on the side of the sun, then bigger shadow until half the moon was covered in shadow once again, and then after another 3.5 days, and before the month was over, the moon was almost again completely covered in shadow, and the Earth children did not see almost any more light. The moon sweeper kept sweeping, though. He wanted all the shadows to be sent off the moon. He swept and he swept, and once he was done with the side he was on, he noticed once again that there was shadow that as far as his eyes could see. He was furious and confused. How could this be? I've been sweeping and sweeping, but there's still shadows in front of me. What the Earth children could see was a new moon, and the moon sweeper was not going to give up. He would sweep and he would sweep until there would be no more shadows on the moon. And to this day, they say that the moon sweeper is trying to sweep the shadows away. Right, I hope you found that story helpful. It just shows us that, just a helpful or easy, catchy way to remember that the light will start on the side facing or side of the sun, and then once the light has covered the moon, the shadows will begin on the side facing the sun, or the side of the sun. All right, let's do a little exercise to see how well you can remember the phases of the moon. All right, so in this exercise, before I do anything, I'd like you to pause the video and try this for yourself. All right, did you try it for yourself? Let's see if you got your answers correct. So the first one on this side would be what? That's correct, it would be new moon. So let's color that in, let's shade that in. So completely covered in shadow, we have our new moon. That is terrible. I don't even have a gray. Okay, I'm just going to do it like this, so to save time. But I'd like you to shade it properly, please. Okay, new moon. Let's write that label in. New moon. Okay, the next one. After new moon, remember the moon goes anti-clockwise. Oopsie. Okay, anti-clockwise revolution. So like that. Okay, so then the next one would be waxing crescent. Exactly, because the light's coming on, wax on, wane off. So wax on the light, and remember the light comes, the moon sweeper swept with the sun behind him, so the light will come from the side of the sun. Let's put that here. And that is a waxing crescent, because the shape of it is that of a crescent or croissant. Okay, and that would still be covered in shadow. All right, then we have the first quarter, so half moon basically, but we'll call this, but it's called the first quarter moon, and the light is now half covering the moon. Okay, then we have waxing gibbous, because the moon's face is not quite full yet, so it's kind of deformed, so we call it a gibbous. Okay, then after 14 days, on the opposite side of a new moon, we have our full moon. And that there's no shadow at all. All right, then after full moon, the sweeper has kept sweeping on the other side, and now he's pushing the shadows back. And the shadows will then start on the side of the sun. So the shadow will start from here, and then continue growing. So then this we call what? That's correct, we call it a waning gibbous. Waning because now the light is leaving. So remember, wax on, wane off, the light is leaving, so it's a waning gibbous. Waning gibbous. Okay, I'm sorry for that, that's not very neat, but you know the spelling. Waning gibbous. The next one is, yes, third quarter, because it's 3 quarters from new moon, so it is third quarter, and the shadow has grown to cover half the moon now. Okay, then lastly, we have the shadow almost completely covering the face of the moon that we can see from Earth, and we call that a waning crescent. Right, a waning crescent. Because the only bit of light left is in the shape of a crescent, and that will leave soon and create the last step, or the 8th phase, and the first phase, which is new moon. All right, so let's recap. We started new moon, then we have waxing crescent, then we have first quarter. After first quarter, we have waxing gibbous. I'm going to put it here because space. Well, no, N doesn't have a dot. Okay, waxing gibbous. You have a gibbous of a face, sir. Waxing gibbous, full moon, waning gibbous, third quarter, and then finally waning crescent, waning crescent. All right, and there we go. There's our phases of the moon. Let's number them. So 1, 2. So 1 new moon, 2 waxing crescent, 3 first quarter, 4 waxing gibbous, 5 full moon. Am I counting correctly? Yes. 6 waning gibbous, 7 third quarter, and 8 waning crescent. All right, and there's our moon phases. Now, I'm going to throw a curveball at you, and I hope you can take it. Okay, you ready? Now the sun's on the left side. Right, would you think you'd be able to do that? I think you just might, right, if you concentrate really hard. Okay, I'll do the four quadrants with you, and then you can fill in the rest. And remember, it's not that difficult. Just remember, new moon is the first step, and from so going counterclockwise is the rest of the phases. All right, so you have to ask yourself, where is new moon going to be? Is it going to be on the opposite side of the sun and earth? Well, no, it can't be, because remember, if that's the case, we wouldn't see a shadow. We would see the full light of the sun hitting that phase. So that would be full moon, which means new moon must be between the sun and the earth. So this here would be the new moon. Color that in very ugly because I don't have crayons. Okay, that's as good as it's gonna be, boys and girls. Okay, there we go. There's my new moon. Okay, then easy peasy. Then obviously opposite side must be full moon. Okay, then first quarter, well, if we're going clockwise, then clockwise that way, clockwise, like the hands of a clock. Sorry, not clockwise, counterclockwise, anti-clockwise, opposite the hands of clock. The next one would be first quarter, it would then be here, right? So first quarter. And where is the light going to be? Aha, on the side of the sun, good. So the light would start that side, on the side of the sun. So wax on that light, right? Sweep on that light, smooth sweeper on the side of the sun, right? Because he started with the sun behind him, so the light will come on by the side of the sun, right? Next, let me just write there, first quarter. All right, next one we have, okay, I'm not going to say this middle one yet, but then we have the full moon, and then after full moon we have third quarter, because it's 3 quarters after the new moon. So third quarter, and again, it's like half, it looks like half moon, right? But now the shadow's on the side of the moon, right? Because remember, he kept sweeping, and he's basically pushing that shadow back so that the earth children see the shadow again. Silly moon sweeper. Okay. All right, there are 4 quadrants, and I mean, the rest should be easy, but I'll just, I'll do them with you, but I'll give you a chance to do it first. All right, did you pause and do it yourself? Okay, I hope so. Right, so after new moon is waxing crescent. Then it's first quarter. Then after first quarter, it's waxing gibbous. Then it's full moon. Then after full moon, it's waning gibbous, followed by third quarter. And after third quarter, it's waning crescent. I just want to show you something here quickly. Oh no, did it erase? It did. Oh no. Okay, let's try to go back, all the way back. Rewind. There we go. Right. I want you to take note. Notice how waxing and waning crescent are basically let me use my laser. They're basically mirroring each other, right? They're in the same, so new moon, waxing crescent. But notice how waning crescent is basically the mirror image of the waxing crescent. It's right below it, except it's just mirroring where the light is. And notice how first quarter is the mirror of third quarter, and third quarter is the mirror of first quarter. And notice how waxing gibbous is just mirroring waning gibbous. So they're basically opposite each other, and they're mirror images. So there's no way you can put your phases or lunar phases in the wrong place, boys and girls. New moon is the opposite of full moon, and it's on the opposite side. All right, that's just like little cheats or things to remember, right? But the understanding the phases and how they work is better than cheats. But, when all else fails. Right, I hope you found that helpful, boys and girls. And if there's any more questions, please refer to your notes. And if you still have questions, refer to me or ask me on Class Dojo. Thank you, and I hope you found this helpful. Have a good day and good luck studying.